Hello, this is James Hunter, and today I'm going to be speaking with Rebecca HALE. Rebecca is an owner and creator and CEO By the Grace of Golf. Her specialty is working with autism, ADHD, and trauma. And more recently here, I've been, she's on my Facebook friends list. So I see her feed and I follow her on Facebook. So she has a lot of stuff with a book called Warrior Women, which she'll be speaking about that today. And so, Rebecca, when I get into some of these questions, very flexible. I've interviewed Rebecca, by the way, before, I believe about last year sometime, perhaps about a year ago. And so this interview, we're going to be talking about some other things today. So if you don't mind me asking, let me just give you a general question. If you want to maybe tell us a little bit about your story pertaining to this context with golfing, right? And the book, and you can just begin with that. Like, how did you arrive here today with your book and doing all these interviews and talking about this? By the grace of golf. There you go.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm really excited about this project that's rolling out because the golf piece is a structure that I have been able to put 25 years of experience into and something I've become very passionate about. So, my background of this is that when I was a little girl, I suffered a trauma that I didn't recall until later in life. And it impacted every aspect of my life, relationships, whether I was successful in the work that I did, how I mothered. And I went through a lot of different therapies. And I did a lot of the woo-woo things that you
Yeah.
have talked about with different people.
Yeah.
I did a lot of different things to try to heal and never quite broke through some pretty important things. One relational and the other one was financial. So those two places were where I was really stuck, that were impacted by my unworthiness, shame, guilt, that kind of stuff that hovered. Fast forward to COVID times, and I picked up the game of golf, which I thought was a really stupid game. I'm an athlete, similar to you. I think that's why you and I connected. I liked
Yeah. Yeah.
weightlifting. I was a track runner. I liked doing things that were hard
Yeah.
physically, and I liked being in shape. And I just didn't understand golf at all.
Yeah.
And so I picked up golf, kind of on a whim to do with my boyfriend. He liked doing it. He'd done it for 20 years. And I thought, well, maybe we'll try it together. I took a lesson, and my first lesson, I had these weird biological things that unfolded that I didn't anticipate happening. So I was like, what is going on with this? It started making me go down like a rabbit hole of about your fascia and the connection of your fascia with your diaphragm. So your breathing, whether you're shallow breathe, deep breathe, your pelvic floor, and the tension, relating it with your vagus nerve. I started going down this major rabbit hole of things. And so I started finding, as I began to pick up the game and started working out, I started learning a lot about my nervous system. Because I was learning the game alongside my boyfriend, I was finding the mirroring of what was happening and unfolding on the golf course to be unfolding within our relationship. And I was having this experience with him because I was able to be really open about what was happening physiologically with me when I golfed. I was able to also have those conversations in our relationship. And I was having these huge breakthroughs. Like all of a sudden, all of the barriers that I couldn't break through before with therapy were unfolding, because in order for me to be successful with my golf game, which I really wanted to be, I wanted to be consistent and successful, and I wanted to get better. In order for that to happen, my fascia couldn't be in this fight or flight stage, which I started differentiating between stretching your muscles, like your muscles being in good shape and having flexibility, which I had. My fascia was locking down and didn't allow me to have the rotational components that I needed to have a successful golf swing with consistency. And so that I started doing the science of all of that and figuring it out. And because I had had huge breakthroughs in so many areas of my life, I was like, this is interesting. And all of the things, uh, the structures like flexibility, balance, strength, I could look and then overlay in golf with golf movements. And I started to create a workshop. And I just decided to throw it out there. And interestingly, the workshops that I did, 80% of the women never golfed before, so had zero golf experience. So a lot of people are like, I'm not that interested in golf. I'm like, I get it. I thought it was dumb. But once they start hearing my story, they're like, that's interesting. Well, I'm interested, might like to learn the game, or maybe I'd just like to have this intuitive experience that you have, where you talk about my body and how I learn how my nervous system works and how I can self-regulate and learn my body right away and then apply it in relationships.
Mhm.
And so that was birthed. I got invited to be in that book you were talking about, Warrior Women, and I wrote a story, and kind of the nuggets of what unfolded for me. And then that took on a life of its own. And so here I am. People are really interested. It's definitely a niched thing, because I talk about the two key words I talk about in what I do is trauma and golf, and that's very niched. And yet, because my story is so relatable, having a childhood trauma and wanting to break through it, people are really interested in it.
Yeah.
And so I get people who have never golfed before that are interested in just having this unique experience.
Yes. I love what I'm hearing here and what you said about this, this being able to, what I'm hearing is being able to differentiate between fight or flight and being able to have that dealt with because golf, and it's a bit grounding because you have to be in the moment, your muscle fascia, that mind body connection. So that's fantastic. And I really can appreciate that. And so for you, this became a mechanism, if you will, by which several things, or more than several things, are going on here. It's helping you form a connection with your boyfriend. This is a type of, it's intimate, right? You're golfing, you're learning, perhaps he's teaching you the game. So now you're having to learn to have a connection and relationship within this context, because you don't have time to be anywhere else if you're truly trying to focus on a lot of sports, particularly golfing, right? Holding the golf club, right? How the body's working together. I hear some veterans sometimes talk about jiu-jitsu and judo for them is very grounding. They don't have time for their mind to be anywhere else when somebody's trying to choke you on the mats, right? Yeah, you have to be in the moment. It's grounding. So this idea of, for a lot of people have trauma, and they've maybe traditional therapies, right? That they've tried in the mental health community that maybe has not fully done that for them. So something else, right? Maybe 5 + 5 = 10 is great for most people, but other people might be a 100 divided by 10 person, or an 8 + 2 = 10 person to get 10. So I'm interested in really learning a lot more about this for people, that because the fight or flight, because a lot of people have trauma, a lot of context of trauma, that fight or flight or eggshells feeling that there's always something there, that something can go wrong. And so I'm always in this state. It's underlying, and then finding a way to deal with that. And for you, it's golf. How do you compartmentalize, differentiate, to not overestimate threats, but not underestimate them either, to have that healthy balance? It's always making a judgment call as you go, and then to be healthy, right? Balance. So yeah, that's for you. Golf was your thing, right? It's kind of started grounding you and pulling you back to a reality in life, and I guess health, right? To be healthy.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. I had a really interesting experience. You said you and I see you on Facebook, you see me on Facebook.
Yeah.
And so with the book, it just launched, and I was in New York City. Now, I enjoy going into a city for a bit, but it's overwhelming. Like I would never be able to live in a city. I'm a country girl. I love that you have your deer all around your
Yeah.
property. Like
Yeah.
that kind of stuff
Mhm.
excites me. You know, I have a
Mhm.
little snake in my backyard that made
Yeah.
me real happy this
Yeah.
morning. Like
Yeah.
that's what kind of, fuels me. But I went to the city for 4 days and I knew it would be overwhelming. I knew I'd have to come home and kind of decompress. But I really didn't have time for it. I came home and I kept going, going, going. And then what happened, so that was last week. And then the weekend was quite busy and rolled right into actually a week of golf. We had a vacation. And I thought, well, I can't take time to have a vacation because my business, like so many things are happening. But I was like, no, I committed to doing it. The first day on the golf course was a complete disaster, and I haven't had a disastrous, like totally disastrous golf game in a while because I've been so in tune with my nervous system and knowing like how to regulate and be fully there. But because of those 4 days in the city and I didn't give myself the time to recalibrate, that first day was a disaster. So was the next day. By the third day of golf, I was like, you know what, my whole system is a wreck, and I had to go through the motions that I go through with the people in my workshop that I hadn't even done. So with the way that you train for like bodybuilding and
Mhm.
stuff, like our bodies are
Yeah.
so um they're so sensitive to
Sure.
in the environment we put ourselves in,
Yeah.
or and stressors we put ourselves in, and we can't forget
Yeah.
that we have to get back into the
Mhm.
routine of things that help keep our body balanced. We were talking
Sure.
about caffeine, how
Yeah.
much caffeine you have
Yeah.
and things like
Yeah.
that. Like I had changed my whole routine. I was in a place where I was totally in fight or flight, like
Mhm.
in protective mode. I'm in the city. I have to watch my back. Things came up. We had to be on guard. There were reasons we had to be on guard. And my body, I never got myself out of that state. So then I show up at the golf course, my body's literally tense, everything's tense, and I can't swing a club to
Yeah.
have the outcome I want. And so it has been my method of a meter. I knew it, but I have this like golf shows me physiologically that
Mhm.
I am not on point right now.
Yeah.
And what do I need to recalibrate? And so for me, that was an interesting thing. And, as I say that to you, it's like when you work with people physically, it's like, so you help people mind body get their body in the best state. You practice what you preach. I know that about you. I try to do the same, and yet we still fall off the wagon
Yeah. Sure. Of
at
course. Yeah.
times,
Yeah.
and have to get back on. And so
Mhm.
I had a checkpoint this
Yeah.
week of like, you got to practice what you preach. Like
Yes.
if you did it 4 days ago,
Mhm.
you would be in a different place right now. So it's always a practice. And so having the tools
Mhm.
that when you are off, recognize as quickly as you can to recognize you're off, whatever those ways are that help you recognize.
Yeah.
And then what are the things that you do to get yourself back on track?
Yeah.
Because our mind and body it's so imperative, to
Yeah.
have that in check.
Yes, ma'am. And you can call it biofeedback. They use biofeedback with people with ADHD to help them learn to focus. So
Yep.
there can be a lot of things that where we're using the body to
Yes.
basically focus on feedback in a moment. So, I'm 52 years old. Last time I competed in bodybuilding, I was 50. I have those. That's why I might do it again when I'm 60, right? Who knows? But I've done powerlifting too. And the thing is, at 52, and I tell a lot of the younger guys and women, I'm like, look, we all do the best of what we have, whether it's our mental health, our physical health, all of it together. And you're right. Sometimes we got to refocus, get back on track, and practice what we preach. But I would encourage anyone is to realize is that we all have a upper potential based on your individual situation. So we're with our neuromuscular adaptations, to use that way of speaking, right? The body's going to adapt and get stronger, just like our mind can adapt and get stronger, our temperament, right? But then we get to a certain point that's going to be probably our upper limit. And I say, look, if that wasn't true, then everybody would be Superwoman or Superman. We just keep getting stronger and stronger. So I said, look, my goal throughout my life is to know where I've been. And that's helpful because mentally I know where I've been. And I know what I'm capable of. And maybe that won't always be the case when I'm 75, 80 years old. But you know what? My goal is to do my best to, while staying healthy and fit and injury-free, to stay as close to that as I possibly can. So that's the getting back on track, because you're right. Sometimes maybe we're not always doing the things we need to do. And we're like, oh, hey, wait a minute. I need to focus. So, do you know why I love squats? I still do squats and I still do deadlifts. And there's a joke that says you don't stop squatting and deadlifting when you get old. You get old when you stop squatting and deadlifting, right? So I do that. Those are my two. That's my bread and butter, and then I base everything around those two movement patterns. But when you have, I'm about 165 pounds. So if I have 300, 400 pounds on my back, and I'm going down with that weight, you have to be totally focused on exactly what you're doing, your foot placement, feeling that your muscles eccentrically expand on the way down, feeling everything systemically come together. And then on the way back up, there's no to slacking off or being distracted if you don't want to be hurt, right? And that's one of the things I do kind of pride myself on, is that I've made it this far injury-free, knees, hips, everything's fine because of that, being grounded, focused. And so that's what I get out of weightlifting. One of the things I get out of it, in addition to all the other benefits, right? So it's helped me to be grounded, biofeedback. I can get in a moment and say, hey, I need to focus. And I can, because of weightlifting and other things. I know how to get my body to cooperate with me to get focused, whether it's maybe in a high stress anxiety situation. Yeah, I can use the breathing, parasympathetic nervous system, right? Calm myself down. So my relationship with my body, to speak to what you're speaking with the golf example, yeah, that's paramount in my ability to manage anxiety, to be healthy, and to focus. It all goes together. So this is flexible, by the way, for people watching this video. So for Rebecca, she's using her golf example, which is wonderful. And then I played sports in my life and I still exercise now to this day. So those are my mediums to help me have this relationship that Rebecca, that I hear you talking about, that's transferable to other things in life.
Yeah. That's right. And you make I think, a very good distinction with the way that you have trained, and probably the way you teach people and encourage people, is that it's not about doing the squats, right? And how much weight you put on. It's literally about being fully present and knowing how your body is responding to it. When you start to understand how your body responds to it, and you're noticing everything about you're fully present and knowing, then you're empowering yourself in the movement. And that to me is like the reason you hire a trainer. And when you have a good trainer is that or that you're having an experience with anything, especially any kind of exercise. It's not the exercise, because we know you can go on YouTube and you can look up the best exercises, right? All day long, and you can go do them. It's the person that tells you how to pay attention to your body, when to breathe, the timing of your breath with your body, so that you're heightening the physiological experience of doing that resistant weight, and how your body's moving through it. So like, there's a lot of different ideas about how you should squat, right? Whether your knees go over your toes, whether they stay in it, all you can pick that apart. But the reality is your body is unique, right? So you squat a certain way. You could probably look at the way I squat and you could give me feedback. Hey, I suggest you do this based on what your body's doing. Those intricacies are what make or break the outcome of how you squat. And yet a lot of time that gets lost, so it's like, it really is about, when I do the golf thing, it's really about, I don't care about this movement. Like, we're doing this movement. We could do 10 other movements, but the reality is, like, when you do this movement, pay attention to your body, how it responds. Like, notice what you're doing. Look at my body and then emulate that and feel what that feels like in your body
Yeah.
so you can emulate it. And that knowingness of your body, because most people go through life numb. And so when you're doing things that are purposeful, like you mentioned the jujitsu, you mentioned the weightlifting, we're talking about my golf thing. It's like,
Mhm.
it's when you're being purposeful in your movement and you're paying attention to your body and you're not numb to the
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
It's when your body gets fully online
Yeah.
and when you really create that mind body
Yeah.
connection, which allows your hormones to flow
Mhm.
correctly, which
Yeah.
allows the fluid in your joints to be on board. And that, to me, when you're talking about what you're talking, it gets me so excited, because it's like, that's what it's about. It's knowing, why you and I connect. It's because it's purposeful. It's like, we're not talking about, okay, squats are your favorite squat, but
Yeah.
you do your squats so mindfully,
Mhm.
and there's the purpose behind them is so um you're so focused on why you're doing it and how you're doing it. That's why the outcome for you
Yes.
has
Yeah.
been what it is
Yes, ma'am.
over the years.
And you're correct. You don't. It's not necessarily about the weight. So whether it's just typical weight that someone might use for rep range, 8-12 reps, it doesn't have to be the upper ends. But I kind of use that example of the heavier weight sometimes, because one time this lady who meant well in the gym years ago, she's like, James, you should really train your core more. And I got what she was trying to lean in towards, like maybe do more planks and sit-ups and Pilates stuff perhaps. But I was jokingly with her, and I said, well, I'll call her Marie. I said, Marie, I want you to think about something. When I go to that free weight squat rack with a barbell, and let's say I put, I don't know, 225 pounds on it, I get underneath it, I walk it back, not wearing a belt, and I do below parallel deep squats for 10 reps. Could you imagine that I'm utilizing some core strength to achieve that movement? She thought about it. Oh, no, you're right. Yeah, that's absolutely a lot of core strength. I'm having to keep my abs tight to contain the pressure on the way down so nothing gets pulled or hurt. So systemically, that core is more than just doing a plank. Is my little joke, but anyways. So no, you don't have to use a bunch of weight. You don't have to use a bunch of weight. You're right. It's about being, I guess, in the moment with it, right? Maybe a little Zen,
Yeah.
be in the moment with it. But yeah, a lot of ways to achieve core strength. That's my little gym humor for my friends in the gym. Like, hey, it's the 5+5 thing again. A lot of ways to get my core strong. That's right. So she knows it's playing with her. So yeah. Like, hey, it takes core strength to do a squat without a belt. But yeah. So, well, the book, I'm just curious, how long was that been in the work? And I mean, is it kind of like you ladies know each other in a roundabout way? Maybe you're kind of just years of just hanging out, and then somebody feels or all of y'all feel inspired perhaps, and somebody says, let's write a book and tell all you ladies stories, right? So how did the book come about? I mean, as far as whose idea was this, and maybe what do you hope this book, what do you hope it's gonna inspire other people or help them with? You mentioned trauma and the grounding and all that. I guess, what do you want to say about the book? What do you hope it achieves, right? And maybe also how it got inspired to be written.
Yeah. So, well, I'll give a shout out to my friend Desiree Cruz.
Yeah.
She's the one who, this was her vision. And I met her through her husband, Jesse Cruz. So they're kind of this dynamic couple, and their business model is to get people to tell their story. So they have a speaker platform. So they get people to speak their story. And oftentimes it's people who have never spoken their story before, so and have never been speakers, so they help people with that. So that's their thing. That's how I met them. And I really I didn't have any aspiration for writing. I didn't think I was a good writer. I didn't think that was something I would do. If ever I was going to create something, it was going to be a workbook, like a how to. So I never really thought about doing that. But she asked me, based on, the fact that she knew I had a story that I wanted to share. This book in particular, Warrior Woman, is full of faith-based women, which that was actually what was the clincher for me, is that that's kind of the walk that I'm in right now.
Okay.
And so all of the women are faith-based. Um, Desiree had the women in the book, she knows everybody, but most of us didn't know each other. And so so she cultivated people who had a story, were faith-based, and that's how it came together.
Mm.
I think we started in November of last year, so this was a really quick turnaround. Everybody had to have a story in. I think we had about a month
Mhm.
to get our, a little over a month to get our story in, and I happened to already have a story. I had the story that I wrote was a TED talk I had created. I've never done a TED talk, but I did a precursor. Um, and so I read kind of the structure of this story to maybe over 200 people. And I knew that people were interested in the story. So I took that story and expanded it and fine-tuned it, and that became the story. And my story is really about golf. Like, I don't talk about my trauma in the book. I talk about the fact I have a trauma, but this is what happened. And I think the last time we talked about this, and this
Yeah.
is really what this is my what I go to. This is what I teach people, is that our body holds emotions,
Mhm.
and movement is a facilitator to release emotions. And I'm sure you've experienced that with yourself and clients, where when you work out and you work your muscles, like you can have this big letdown where emotions come out. People that receive massages, often you're on the massage table
Mhm.
and you get a deep massage and you're just bawling your eyes out. Like,
Yeah.
massage therapists have that experience. And
Mhm.
so as a physical therapist over the years, that's been my experience with people right from the beginning. I realized, though I teach people how to do exercises and heal from surgery or autism, what I'm doing now, autism and ADHD, what is happening is when people move their body, that frees their emotions. And because of the way I interact with my clients, I give them a safe space. They trust me. I mean, that's the precursor for working with me, is, I need to develop a trusting relationship with people so that they feel like the space I'm creating, that they can allow those things to come up and they can share with me, because when you share and you let those emotions come up, your body can heal. Um, there's a great book, The Body Keeps the Score,
Yes.
and that, I'm sure you know it. And so that has been the model that I have done all of my physical therapy work on. And that has more of a psychological, social worker therapist kind of edge to it. But that's really where my work has gone, through movement.
Mhm.
And so my story talks about it often is the first time somebody's hearing that, oh wow, like, I had this trauma years ago, whether it be a car accident, whether it be sexual abuse, whether it be whatever it is. Like you said, most people have trauma.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's very minimal, sometimes it's a lot, but it still impacts how you go through life. Your traumas impact how you go through life. And so if they get in the way of you having successful relationships, successful career paths, or whatever, it's really important to get those out there. So sometimes I'm the first person that people are hearing, wow, I didn't realize that I've been holding these emotions, and it would be helpful to release them. So people read my story, and I talk a lot about the physiology, and I talk about the nuances of when I moved my body. And I actually couldn't do those rotational movements. When you weight lift,
Mhm.
everything's pretty linear. It's like, you do curls in one plane.
Mhm.
Um I'm sure you do a lot of rotational
Mhm.
movements. That's become more of a thing in weightlifting, but it wasn't when I was
Yeah.
weightlifting. Everything was linear. So when I did this golf thing and there was this rotation, my body couldn't do that. So I talk about that, and I talk about when I was facilitated through that movement, all the emotions that came charging through. So
Yeah.
my chapter happens to be the first one, and it was strategically placed that way because I talk about, freeing your emotions. And then the other women talk about all of the things that happened in their life. So their books are of turning these life lessons into legacy. That's the
Yeah.
tagline in the book. And so these women are talking about some really heavy things that happen in their life, and they're just average women that had these stories that they worked through, and they talk about the nuggets of how they worked through them. So what's been happening, and what I didn't dream was going to happen, is um, my family members, my friends have gotten these books, and they start to read the stories. They hear about releasing emotions, then they read a chapter that resonates, and it doesn't have to be exact. It's just like it resonates with them, and then part of their they can release their emotions. And so as people are going through it, it's a really simple read. It's a short book, it's a simple read. You can read one chapter, you can skip to someone else's
Yeah.
chapter for whatever
Yeah.
reason, and it's
Yeah.
simple.
Yeah.
And yet people are having these major unfoldings in their life because they can resonate with someone else's story.
Yeah.
And
Hey,
so
simple's
really
good.
powerful.
I like that. Simple's good, right? Just
Yeah.
you can just go through the book and look at different people's stories. So yeah, I mean that's exciting, and it's called Warrior Women, but sounds like people in general can benefit from this book. So men too, right? They can read these stories and
Yes.
derive something from it. But I mean, it's Warrior Women, which is fantastic. It's telling the stories of all you incredible women out there, right? That your journeys. So I imagine, obviously, women are going to resonate with a book titled Warrior Women, of course, right?
Yeah.
But hey, why not? If you're a guy, sure. I mean, have an open mind. Don't be a bit skeptical because it doesn't say warrior men. No, just pick up the book and read it. You might learn something, right? Well, you definitely could learn something for sure.
There's so
What are your,
much.
go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what I wanted to say about that is, like, what's happening is a lot of men reach out to me to
Mm-hmm.
buy the book for
Yeah.
their women,
Yes.
which is
Okay.
interesting. But if they were to read it, you know,
Mm-hmm.
so one, they see the warrior woman in their partner, which is really a nice tribute, right? But two, sometimes, like what happened for me when I wrote this story, I I had my dad read it and edited it for me. My boyfriend read it and edited it. So they saw some pretty intimate parts of me and edited it, but they learned about me and how
Yes.
I function because of
Yes.
writing this story. And what I can say about, for men, one, for them to understand their partner better, right? Because, oh, wow,
Yes.
this person went through this. And when they relate to me in this way, when they respond in a way that I don't like, it's
Mhm.
not because of me. It's
Yes.
because they have a history and an experience, and maybe
Sure.
I can be more compassionate and maybe I can help them. And this book
Yes,
can give
ma'am. Yeah.
people language,
Yeah.
a guy or a girl, to have a
Yes.
conversation that allows healing to happen and
Mm-hmm.
also a more intimate relationship.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's
Yeah.
huge.
Well,
And men have trauma too.
yes, they do. Well, what I'm basically hearing you say, this book, yeah, it can help men have more empathy,
Yeah.
understand. Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Sure, because it's written from a perspective from women, your
Yeah.
journeys, your lives, and so men, yeah, it can help them with empathy in terms of how they internalize their wife. Right? It's not like you're saying; it's not personal. If they're having a bad day, maybe they got some trauma in the past.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like that, and I know in school many years ago, I would read books from a psychological perspective, from the point of view of women. It was actually one of the course studies I took. It was called it was a topics course in psychology, and it was gender, and I looked at the different developmental experience for women versus men, because it's different. It's just what it is, as far as because of a whole bunch of things that are too long for me to go over in this video. But yeah, so empathy and so I'm married, and as I've gotten older, I have a lot more empathy for my wife. It's just what it's like to be, for her experience, how she grew up, her history, her childhood, and just as a woman, it's not going to be the same as it is for a man. It's just what it is, and if we're being
Yeah.
honest, yeah. So
Yeah. Yeah. Handle things so differently. I mean, I'm grateful for the conversations that have come from this book, because it tables a lot of things. It removes the fact that it's like, I want to share with you what I'm going through. And I recognize that my response to you wasn't fair. You know, I want to be able to say that to you, like say my partner, I want to be able to say to you that I recognize that I was a jerk in what I said, but I don't want you to come back at me and say, yeah, you were. I'd like both of us to grow from this. I want to say, so that was I was having a historic response to something you said to me that I didn't like. And it made me, lack of a better word, triggered me to have a response that was less than desirable. But instead of you being like, yeah, I'd like to work this out so that next time that you want to respond to me that way, you're more sensitive to it because you know that I need to work through that. Sure. And that like we both grow, that you're more sensitive to how I respond to that, and that I don't have that response. And for me, like one of the big things that came out of this is as I'm working through relational things, like I respond, or I have this snappy, I kind of have an edgy, snappy attitude when I feel defensive, and I can see it, but I needed somebody to say, you just did that. You did that snappy attitude thing. And I needed somebody to say that, but I didn't want somebody to say it to me in a condescending way. I wanted somebody to say it constructively.
In a supportive way, Yeah.
Yeah. So like being able to put on the table, like, I'd like this to be constructive, and I want your feedback. And sometimes I'm not going to love the feedback you give me. I'm going to be offended by it, but I need, if you could step to the table with me on this, I'd love to be able to work through this. And I needed that because I couldn't bring that snappy attitude to building a business.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, the thing is, when we communicate honestly with people, even if we do it in the most tactful, respectful way, that's attempting to be supportive. For example, the snappy thing you're talking about, like, hey, so what I'm hearing you say is A, B, C, and D, and you're feeling irritated and you're feeling attacked, or maybe you feel judged. And if that's how you're feeling, I can appreciate that, right? I get it. And like validate their feelings. You don't have to agree with somebody to validate their feelings. It's supportive. You just do it. And that's a basic therapy talk thing, right? So, but yeah, you do that first, and then have the conversation. Well, to be honest with you, when you were doing the snappy thing again, I was feeling whatever the person might have felt when you're doing that. Maybe they feel anxious, they feel confused, whatever they're feeling, because they don't, hey, what's going on here, right? And then you talk about what can help it. What can help this be better, right? So if you have that moment, if you, I call it can be thought of as transference, because therapists deal with this a lot. If you're working with someone in therapy, they have past relationships that they bring with them to therapy. So, for example, maybe someone has issues with a parent, their dad or their mother, a former boss. I mean, pick somebody. Maybe there's a theme there. Yeah. So then they have this issue where they get triggered with any sense of maybe authority, or they think they're being judged, maybe because of what they internalize as past antagonistic relationships. So they're already kind of inclined to maybe see someone that way who might just trying to be giving them some feedback, right? So that's transference. They're transferring it onto you. So not personalizing it, right? Because technically it's not you. It's really like what you're saying earlier. It's about their stuff. So like for a husband or someone in a relationship to learn to step back and say, wait a minute, it's just deep, take a deep breath, right? And try to have understanding what you're talking about, the empathy, right? Have the conversation. And you've seen some of my videos about, I talk a lot about boundaries and relationships, right? So, hey, here's the deal. Within even the context you're talking about is that sometimes we don't communicate honestly because we care about the person. We don't want them to feel offended, right? Right. But sometimes if we really care about somebody and we really want the relationship to be better, we have to be willing to communicate honestly, even when we know it might be taken a certain way, but that's part of what goes with that. Sometimes you just have to accept that's what comes with the territory when you're honest sometimes. Right. But then you deal with it as it happens. Hey, you're feeling defensive, and that's how you feel. I understand. And then you try to give the context. This is what I'm speaking about. This is how it's meant. Have the conversation, and you work through it. You work through it, but you have to be willing to go through that uncomfortableness if you want it to be
Yeah,
better. Otherwise, we don't ever do those. We don't ever have those conversations because,
that's right.
yeah, and then that doesn't help, does it? It keeps us in
Yeah,
that. Yeah, we don't progress. Yeah,
absolutely. And you see that a lot. And unfortunately, that's why a lot of relationships fall apart
yeah.
because, it's like, you want to make each other better,
Mhm.
but it's hard work to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
And both parties have to be willing to do that. And that's tricky.
Mhm. That's
But I
right.
feel like, I feel like, it's important to figure out how to bring it to the table,
Mhm.
and sometimes it's through other people's stories that you can get that empathy lens. Because in the heat of it, when it feels defensive or it feels personal, it's really hard to get to that
Yeah,
conversation. So,
yeah, it is. It is. So yeah, the trigger word, we hear that a lot, or whether it's transference, feeling triggered. And technically, it's how we internalize something or how we interpret what's happening. That's really the trigger. Then, so
yeah,
I try to remind people that, hey, don't take it personal, because they're having a reaction in a situation with you. It's not, it's technically isn't it you directly. It's not. It has to do with their awareness of themselves in contrast to you and maybe what you said. That's it.
that's right.
So try to talk about that awareness they're having, help them through it. Don't be without judgment, right? Just talk about it. And I think just validating people's feelings goes a very long way, even if there is a significant disagreement. If you validate how somebody feels, that's going to get you a lot further. If you just simply start jumping into the explanations, right? Logical, and this is what's happening and describing everything. There can be points to all that stuff, but if you don't do that validating part of the feelings, you're not as likely to get as far, in my opinion, with somebody.
Absolutely.
That's right. Well, there's a lot of good stuff here, Rebecca. I really appreciate your time. And, as far as discuss the book, By the Grace of Golf. And so for you, what are your goals with this as far as I did see, I believe you have a website, By the Grace of Golf, I believe. So I'm going to be putting that up here. Your
Great.
book will be up here when this video is published on YouTube. But are there any things that maybe you want to speak to as far as anyone who's listening to this video today and they've never heard of Rebecca HALE before, and now they know who you are, and they're like, hey, how can I contact this lady? I'd love to have a conversation with her, or maybe she might come speak to a group of our employees or something, or maybe they want you to be in some context, get involved with you, in other words, right? How does what is the best way, I guess, for people to contact you?
Yeah, my website gets directly to an email.
Mhm.
I'm very active on Facebook. So
Okay.
Rebecca.hale76 is my Facebook. And I'm really active on that. So Facebook Messenger. But my website should be rolling out the things that are coming up. I love doing in-person intimate workshops, but as you mentioned, I work with big groups, kind of do something a little bit unique, bring the fun of golf, but bring all some of these conversations. So like how to have better working relationships, being honest and integrity,
Mhm.
and working those concepts
Okay.
in like a business environment
Okay.
using some fun golf. I know
Yeah.
a lot of companies right now, wellness is a big thing that they're
Mhm.
doing, and they have to spend a certain amount of money on wellness, but
Yeah.
they don't want to just bring a speaker that just stands in front of the room.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we do a lot of interactive things.
Yeah.
So I'd love opportunities to
Yeah.
jump in a room with people and bring the movement piece that
Yeah.
I have that comes with the language about
Yeah.
this. So
No, I love that. The interactive medium is this superior. It really is for helping people grasp concepts.
yeah,
We may have heard of ropes courses before. We used to do those with kids
sure.
back in the day, and it would really get them to learn life skills they needed. That you're not going to get that just having somebody stand up in a classroom and talk to you, right? You got to actually do it. Um, the I was going to mention, okay, so something I was going to circle back to, because we're mentioning about kind of like a faith-based type of ideas. And I find this interesting when we look at whether it's recovery from trauma, recovery from drugs, which typically has trauma, right? They go together. Uh, or pick an issue. It's where a person's trying to develop, recover, and develop into a healthier person. Over the years, you hear people that can be very dismissive of this word faith, right? Based, right? In fact, different support groups, like there's 12-step programs, for example, that's been around forever. And it has a first step to believe in a higher power. And I know individuals who've done stuff like that before who are, some might be Jewish, some might be Christian, some might be Buddhist, Hindu, Muslim, some might be agnostic or even atheist, right?
Yes.
But this idea, and they all derived a benefit of the doing something is the point. Having a program and a plan. I think it's unfortunate. It's a bit dismissive, in my opinion, to just have it as black or white. There's no shades of gray. Oh, that faith-based stuff, baloney, right? Well, I can tell you this: in my 26 years of working in rehabilitation field for mental health, people with addictions, sometimes I would just very politely and respectfully say, "Well, how well is that working for you?" Right? It's not. So most of the time, because it's a dismissive, sometimes almost pessimism or nihilistic way of looking at the world that devoids them of any responsibility or empowerment. So having faith is believing in something, if even yourself, right? Something that's meaningful. And
Yeah.
so I'm a big believer and proponent of having it part of the foundation of the whole person. One of those things needs to be, you can call it spiritual faith, something, and that's flexible. All people have different things that can work for them. But you see a lot of that sometimes in the secular world, that people want to split hairs and well, I just want to go to a therapist that'll make me move my eyes back and forth really fast while I reprocess my memories and flip them into something different that'll be healthier for me to cope with. Maybe I'll just do that. I don't need no idea of a higher power, spirit, or nothing, right? Or let me just take medication and do that only, and not even try to focus on this spiritual transformation stuff, or look at my character defects if maybe I have some, right? Such as maybe I lack patience. Maybe I need to have work on that. So all these other things that are basically essentially transformations in behaviors. There's this idea too about, if you mentioned the word moral, right? What does that mean? In a dictionary, moral simply has to do with right or wrong behavior within a culture. That's it. It's not being high and mighty and judgmental. So within a culture, wherever you live at, can some of your behaviors objectively be seen as maybe right or wrong behavior, right? Nobody's perfect. I have wrong behaviors. I'm sure I do. And I've had. So to that extent, do we do that inventory of ourselves where we can work on ourselves, right? Because of political correctness sometimes, oh, you can't say stuff like that, right or wrong behavior. Don't say faith-based. Don't mention anything spiritual. And yep. And while we're on top of it, you can't judge people. And you probably watched my video about, yes, it's okay to judge people. How are you going to have boundaries with people if you don't use judgment, right? So anyways, what are your thoughts on some of these ideas of, because all these women in this book, I would imagine they have faith in something. It may not be exactly the same for all of y'all, but they probably believe in something that's
Yes.
part of their journey that helped them, right, to heal and develop and be where they're at now. So
Yeah. I've had quite the journey with faith
yeah.
and what I what I called on for a higher power or faith. It's I've been in every realm. I've gone down the medium route. I've done universe, all of that. I think we talked about this last
Yeah.
go around. I started off in the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
That's where abuse happened. So
You're right.
I immediately went away from that. But for me, I mean, and why my title is By the Grace of Golf, and the play on words with the grace of God is really important. It's like it's foundational to why I am where I am. It's I can't overlook anymore my faith in God, in Jesus in particular.
Mhm.
That's where I am.
Okay.
And I, like I said, I respect the journey because I sat in a lot of different places. Um, there's something to me about the Bible and about reading the word every day and having this, I don't even know how to describe it. I'm pretty new, probably about 3.5 years into.
Oh, you're oh, there you go. I can hear you now. So so your journey with reading the Bible, is what you're saying?
Yep, every
Okay.
single day. I start my day every day with the Bible. Generally, it's 2 hours, and
Okay.
that sounds crazy to people, but my
No.
children are grown.
Yeah.
I have a business, so
Yeah.
it's like I can.
Yeah.
When I do that, and if I don't have 2 hours, it's 5
Yeah.
minutes,
Yeah.
15
No,
minutes,
that's
but
that's fantastic. If it makes you feel better, I have a Strong's Concordance that gives you the Greek for the New Testament and the Hebrew or Aramaic for the Old Testament, where you can find the equivalent or the actual word, the meaning of it before it's translated to English. So I'd use that. I would read, and when I was curious about words, I would look them up
yes,
in their original. So that's a lot of fun doing that.
yes,
So the Christian faith, what I recall is that the scripture is spiritually discerned. You pray for understanding, and it's for inspiration, right? If you,
right,
so a lot of people have a lot of ways to look at reading the Bible, and it can,
that's right.
yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in there. I mean, who's going to argue with a, well, I like the one in the book of James: faith without works is dead, because without, you might as well just be like a wave that builds up energy and then crashes and loses all the energy, right? So I always like that. Say, look, we do need to have faith, but we need to have actions that are corresponding action that supports the faith, right? You're not gonna, you can
Absolutely.
have all the faith in the world sitting on the couch. Nothing's gonna help. You need to get off the couch, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So stuff like
Yeah, that
that.
I think that's the big thing that you've touched on it a few times, is the faith is fine. Faith in something is fine, but you have to have faith. You have to take action on your faith.
Yeah.
And to me, the action has to have a moral compass to it, because that's how you stay on path. So for me, as I read the stories of the Bible, and there's sinners throughout the
Oh,
Bible,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I'm a sinner, and so then I do my best to stay on track, and I have a moral compass. Like
Yeah.
every time as I'm going from working for a company and having a business roll out and having people offer for me to be involved in different things, I have had to learn to be discerning about what
Yes.
opportunity is within my moral compass. Like I
Yes.
don't
Yes.
just take every opportunity. Like
Yeah.
somebody wants me to do something in the with a medium that's not in alignment with me
Yeah.
right now. I
Sure.
respect it, and
Yeah.
I think that there's people I'll send to them because
Yeah.
that's in alignment. It's not with me, so I'm becoming very discerning. And so, I think what you said is faith is important, but
Yeah.
faith with action
Yeah.
within a moral
Oh, yeah.
strategy is it's for me how I have seen the fruits
Yes. Yes.
of things that I, I can't take credit for
Yeah.
anymore. Like
Sure. Yeah.
a lot of my life, I'm like, I've worked hard and I've done this, and I did this degree, and I did this, and I helped my children do this. Like
Mhm.
there's so many things that have rolled out in the last 3 years that I
Mhm.
cannot take
Yeah.
credit for. And it makes me look back on my life
Yeah.
and say, you can't take credit for it.
Yeah.
It's like you've always had what you've needed. That's true.
Yeah.
Um, and even in the struggles, it's like that those struggles, that's the time when you have to have your faith. Like when everything's going well,
Yeah.
it's easy to have faith and
Yes.
take action,
That's right. So
but when
so
it's not.
so you don't got to convince me. I'm a big fan of Jesus. Jesus is a very powerful son of God, right? So he taught us a lot of things that have to do with empowerment, or the utility of our faith. You mentioned the sin word. So sin word is basically missing the mark, right? The Apostle Paul says, by one man's, I believe it's Apostle Paul says, yeah, by one man's disobedience, all were made sinners, talking about original sin, Adam, basically, missing the mark. But then by one man's obedience, referring to Jesus Christ, all could
Yes.
be made right with God again. And it's just something I always remind my friends who happen to be Christian, that being righteous doesn't mean that God admires us because we're perfect, or oh, look at this person. This person's a good, solid Christian and very good job, right? No, it's simply means that you're right with God because you trusted God, just like Abraham, right? Abraham, Abraham trusted God, and it was imputed to him for righteousness, and he's called a friend of God. So what made Abraham righteous? Well, he trusted God, believed him, not because he's perfect, right? Now, at the same time, this isn't a get out of jail free card. It's to do whatever you want, because that's not the point. Otherwise, we don't want sin to abound. I mean, that's kind of a hard issue, right? I'm just going to use this idea that I can do anything now, right? And that person's isn't really genuine if that's what they want to see this as. But I've always had different ideas, right, as far as over the years, because I went to the church growing up, and then I started studying and reading for myself, and like, oh, wow, look at all this stuff I've learned that I don't necessarily hear from the pulpit, right? So yeah, this idea about you mentioned the sin word, missing the mark, trusting God. Okay, the last one for people who are like, wonder about Christians, like how they get saved. This is the evidence. It's not about perfect works. Romans 10:9 through whatever after that, right? That if you believe in your heart that God raised Jesus from the dead, and if you confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus, and then believe in your heart that God raised from the dead, you'll be saved. For if the heart a person believes to what? Righteousness. And with the mouth, confessions made to salvation. So again, another example, how does a person become right with God? The heart. That's it. The heart. I don't care how many, no disrespect to my Catholic friends. I don't care. And from my understanding what I read, I don't care how many Hail Marys you recite or whatever things you do. That's kind of got it backwards, right? So it's a bit backwards. Right. So no, it's the heart. It's believing. God's no respecter of person. He's a respecter of faith, right? Yeah. And the faith scriptures, Hebrews 11:1. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, evidence, things not seen, right? So yeah, a lot of good nuggets in there. Whether a person's Christian or not, there's just really some solid information in there that, man, who's going to argue with love your neighbor as you'd love yourself? Well, love God with all your heart and soul, love your neighbors to love yourself. Upon these two hang all the law and the prophets. Jesus, when they're trying to convict him, trying to get him to trip up on his words, and he said those two things. Yeah. So anyways, Jesus, I'm a Jesus fan of all the stuff that he taught and said. So, yes.
I love it. Yeah. Oh, thank you for bringing that to the table today. It's so good.
Yeah. Well, we talked about a lot of stuff. Maybe we could do a separate video someday in the future if you want to talk more about Jesus, if you want. That'd be cool. So do you have anything you might want to say, a final word? I know we kind of jumped around a bit, but that's usually how it goes sometimes, right? Jumping around, having conversations. Do you have anything you might want to say to anyone who tuned in to watch this video today about maybe any of the things that we discussed?
Thanks for listening in. I think I love to connect with people. So if anybody has things they want to bounce off, I'd love to connect with people. But really, life should be simple. Like, be present. Be present with yourself. Be present with the people. Hold yourself accountable and take action.
All right. Well, good deal. I appreciate anyone who's everyone who's watching this video today. I'd appreciate it if you like this video and subscribe to my channel. And do you have a channel, Rebecca, on YouTube, or is it just on Facebook right now? And then your website that you mentioned?
Yeah, Facebook, Instagram. I have a channel, but I'm not terribly active. Maybe someday.
That's okay. Yeah, maybe someday. Just asking, just in case. So,
thank you.
Yes, ma'am. I'll put a link to Rebecca's information below about the book and everything. So thank you all for watching again. Until next time, maybe a part 3 in the future, Rebecca. Okay.
Awesome. I love it.
Yes, ma'am. Bye-bye.